you thinking of upsizing in 2023 and planning on buying, selling at the same time, and you have no idea where to start? Don't worry. In this video, I'm going to share the most important things that you need to know and execute prior to commencing the process. As not all experiences are the same, not all situations are the same, it's really important to have clarity on this so you can customize it and execute it to the best of your ability. This way, you avoid any pitfalls, you sell for top dollar, the purchase goes nice and smooth, and you avoid being on Nightmare on Elm Street and wind up with 2 mortgages. Stick around until the end and I'll share with you the biggest pain point that people have and how to avoid it. So let's get into it. Number 1, discuss your numbers. There are 2 basic things here that you need to establish. Number 1 is really having clarity about the property that you're selling. First of all, knowing what the value is, and then that will be able to give you the breakdown between what you're owing on the mortgage and the equity. Because it's that equity number is what is really key here, because that's going to be used to go towards the purchase. So let's say you have a value in and around $780,000 and a mortgage of about $380,000. So that would then leave you with some equity of about $400,000. So, and you've already got another $200K hanging around that you've saved up. So you've got gross, you've got about $600,000 to play with. Now obviously you're going to need to set money aside for your closing costs, so land transfer tax, commissions, etc., and any other things that you need to do on both sides, because you're doing 2 transactions, and then go from there. The second thing you need to do is go and speak to a mortgage professional, and I'm sure at this point you probably already have one because you already have a mortgage existing. So phone them up, tell them what's going on, and get that pre-approval done. So this then will give you clarity on the amount, the maximum amount that you can borrow. Okay, so let's say that's $700K and you're comfortable using $500K of the equity left. Okay, so that gives you a total availability of 1.2. Okay, now it's noteworthy to say that the max that you can qualify for and what you're comfortable with can be 2 different things. So, and then taking into account the extra, the newer expenses on the new property, because typically when people upsize, they're buying a bigger, more expensive property. So with that assumption in place, we can assume that it's going to cost more for maintenance, it's going to cost more for utilities, etc., etc. So you want to work those heightened expenses into your new budget, and that way, knowing you come up with your monthly carrying costs of something that is comfortable. Because the last thing that you want to do is wind up house poor and not being able to have a life that you've been accustomed to. So the next thing we want to think about is whether we're going to buy or sell first. So this is going to be highly dependent really on 2, and sometimes maybe a couple of other factors. Number 1 being your personal financial situation and how comfortable you feel with the process, in which way it's going to go. Now there are lots of variables here and tons of moving parts, so having an idea of this and setting up a plan prior to just jumping in I cannot stress how important it is. So let's say that you're planning on selling first because you're in a market that is, it's going to take a little bit longer. And also you feel more comfortable selling first because you don't want to wind up, this is how you would avoid winding up with 2 mortgages. So you sell first, and then you know exactly how much cash you have left over, when it's coming, etc., etc. Okay, so let's say you got your $500,000, you've got your mortgage qualification, you've done your numbers, and you know that going up to 1.1 for you is comfortable. Now how you break down what you put on mortgage and what you put on cash, again, those are numbers that you'll want to get into, and those are the finer details that you can speak to more with your mortgage broker or your lender. Okay, so the second way obviously is that you can buy first. Typically this will happen in a busier market, or if we're working in 2 different markets. So let's say someone is leaving Toronto and they're moving out west, and the market conditions in the two cities are very different. So maybe they go out, they buy first, then they come back here knowing that it's not going to be super difficult to sell their property here, and then they proceed that way. So, you know, and when you do it that way too, giving yourself a little bit of extra time for the closing can obviously be advantageous, because it will give you a little bit more time to find something should you be selling first. And then vice versa, you know, the same sort of thing. You give yourself a longer closing on the purchase side, giving yourself a little bit more time to sell your current property. So there's different things at play here. There's different ways that you can do this. Sometimes if things change, you can shorten the closing. Usually, you know, in many cases, people are open to that as well. But it's absolutely crucial that you get straightened out in terms of how you want things to look. The other thing, it's usually possible to arrange. So let's say you've sold and you haven't found a place to live yet. Because you did a quick closing because the price was right, there's always the option to, it's not ideal when you put your stuff in storage and you stay with family for a couple of months, or you do an Airbnb, or if there's a week in between the two closings, or whatever the case may be. So there's always options, but like I said, it really comes down to your comfort level, the market conditions, and your personal situation. So the next thing that we want to think about, guys, is getting our property ready for sale, okay? And this can be done in conjunction with, when you're working through these other things, because they're all going to kind of flow together, and kind of one's going to contribute to another in terms of, the mental focus and the awareness of everything that needs to be done. Because ultimately, when we start these processes, you'll see 1, 2, 3 things, and then as you start to get into it, you'll notice, okay, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 things actually need to be taken care of. So once you get into it, then you can really get the momentum going. One of the biggest things is that many folks, especially nowadays, they really underestimate the importance of preparing the property for sale. And the biggest reason now is because during the pandemic, the bar was raised substantially. And the main reason for that was because the number of transactions that happened over that 2-year period. And it's just, as I said, it was, so the expectations of what people expect in a property nowadays in terms of it, the way it looks, is massive. And many buyers cannot envision themselves in a property with whether it's cluttered with other people's furnitures, they can't envision it with a lot less stuff in there, and it's also hard for people to envision what a property looks like when there's nothing in it. So it actually feels smaller when there's nothing in it versus something that's got well-proportioned furniture and well-proportioned colors to really maximize and make the space feel as open and welcoming as possible. So I cannot stress how important this is. So this can be simple things like decluttering, fixing any things that are, that are outstanding. It could be, like a broken window. It could be, a doorknob that doesn't work, or it could be regrouting the shower because it's, it's old and it's dated and maybe it's a little mildewy or something like that. It could mean, refacing or painting the kitchen cabinets. It might mean replacing the kitchen cabinets. It could mean upgrading the appliances. It could mean, there's a whole host of things. It could mean, if you're selling in the spring or in the fall, curb appeal. So, some potted plants, maybe building a wooden box to hide the garbage receptacles. Things like this to really make the place as open and welcoming as possible. And then, and obviously the biggest contributor to this is staging. And hiring a stager who really has a lot of experience working in the type of property that you own and that you're selling, and can really understand the market, and then can create a vision for the property that's really gonna attract the most amount of buyers through. Because ultimately, your goal is when you list your property for sale, is that you want to have as many people come through the door, get the highest price possible, and sell in the shortest amount of time. And that's regardless of what kind of market that you're in, whether you're in a hot seller's market or you're in more of a balanced market. So I really can't stress these things enough. The more that you do ahead of time, the less you'll need to do when you're on the market. Yeah, so alongside staging, there's other services that you can look into as well to assist you in the preparation process. So contractors, handyman, painters, the list goes on. So here's an interesting fact. In 2020, the Real Estate Staging Association did a survey of over 13,000 homes. And in that, they found that 85% of those homes sold between 5 and 23% over the list price because of the staging and the preparation that they've done. So again, I really can't stress how vital that is. So, which brings me to another thing, which is the influence of television. And you watch these shows like all these shows on HGTV. I won't mention any of them, but you know the ones I'm talking about. And they've got a $100,000 budget and they do this amount of renovations. The truth is that in real life, while the cost of materials, you might get that, there's still the labor part that you're not paying, that hasn't been factored into the equation. So it's such a skewed thing. And the other thing is that buyers will typically discount $2 for every $1 worth of work that needs to be done. And the reason being is because they have a vision of what they're looking for, even though they can't see it. And so if they see a crack in the wall, oh, that's $500. Oh, they don't like the stove, there's another $1,000. Oh, the fridge is not stainless steel. Oh, there's another $10,000. All these types of things. So all these little things can add up and really have an impact on how things on the success of your experience. Okay, so we've reached the final piece, which is criteria and motivation. So in this part, I'm going to give you a very easy 3-prong model that you can work with when establishing or having that criteria conversation, that conversation about what's important, okay? So, and that is the 3 pillars of purchasing real estate, which is price, location, and the unit itself, or the property itself. So, and the idea here is to really take a look at the overall situation, and yet this is where you really have to be honest. Because far too often people have what we call champagne taste beer budget. So they want to live in Rosedale, but they can only afford Parkdale. Okay? So we've got to do some delineating here. We've got to recalibrate our expectations. So, starting with price. Obviously, price is a big factor for many people. But let's say they're flexible on location, so that it gives them a little bit more room to play with. Okay, but say with some people there's 3 or 4 things that they absolutely must have in the property, and those types of properties are only in given locations. Okay, so maybe they need to up their budget a little bit, or maybe they need to something of that nature. Maybe they need to to find something that they can fix up over time and that they can gradually move into and bring up to par. So there's different ways of approaching this within these within these guidelines that will allow you to find the best property for you that it will be perfect for your situation. Okay? And then the last thing I want to talk about is motivation. So when we're talking about criteria, so it's like, where do we want to live? What do we want in the property? Okay, well, it's got to have light. It's got to face this way. It's got to be on a quieter road. Because we have small kids and blah blah blah. So right there, that's one why. Why do you want it on a quieter road? because we have small children, okay? So another thing could be, well, I want something with lots of windows because I like natural light. And it gives me a sense of feeling at home, okay? So this is really because you don't want to get into your new property and then like a month down the road or 6 months or whatever the case may be, and you're absolutely hating it because it isn't, because your expectations of what you really wanted, either you weren't aware of them or you neglected to address them. And the last thing that you want to do, like the last thing, is wind up being in a property that you don't want to be in and that you want to move from. So having a real conversation with you and your partner about what is important and why it's important. So what you do is you each take a sheet of paper, and you each of you write down, what you're wanting, and then you compare notes, and you see how on the same page you are. Okay? So hope you guys like this. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I love helping people answer the questions about real estate and bringing clarity to the process.